Welcome everyone to Be Revealed, live with Wendy Watson. We are here today with Mr. Kyle Gray. And I just want to remind you guys that it takes a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability for our guests to come on here and share their stories about their spirituality and their upbringing. And, spirituality is such a personal thing that I really invite you to listen with an open heart and an open mind and respect the space that they have, because there's an infinite number of ways to define spirituality. I love Deepak Chopra's definition that spirituality is your own individual relationship with God or with whatever it is that you believe in. And so I'm just bringing this show to you so that you can broaden your horizons on what that means to you and hear different stories from people on what that means to them. So I want to welcome Kyle Gray. Would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Wendy, I'm so honored to be here. I'm so honored to be a part of these conversations. And my walk in spirituality is very closely tied with the rest of my life. And it's been a journey of seeking for a long time and digging deep into the answers, and or maybe more the questions than the answers, to be honest with you. And yeah, I'm honored to be here. Uh, as far as I'll introduce myself as kind of the top level professionally thing, and we can break down the layers quite quickly from here.
Yeah.
But I am a world-class storytelling and presentation coach, and along with this, I believe that writing a talk, upgrading your visibility, and doing it in a way that's truly aligned with who you are is a transformative and healing process. And the very best work that I do in speech writing happens to the person that's writing the speech before they ever share the talk with anyone else. But it creates the same sense of enrollment in who they are that that we would expect or hope that anyone listening to us would be. And I am, while I've developed these skills, and I am proud to say that I'm very good professionally at these things, I'm good at these things because much of my life I have been grasping for the answers and the purpose myself. And I've faced many different aspects and challenges um, to explore that over the years, from artistic, spiritual, physical, and professional, that I imagine we'll all weave together today.
Yes, yes, we will. So I'd love to start off with the one main question. What does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality is how the inner world relates to the inner world of me and inside me, which isn't really that different than the rest of the out of the world, but it's the story that I'm telling to myself, about the rest of the world. And it's how I see is do I trust in a plan and something outside of me? And how willing am I to accept that and lean into that? And through that, there's an inherent trusting of myself and my own nature that I've spent a lot of time struggling against and cultivating in the same ways.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about your upbringing. How are you raised? Um, what kind of beliefs and principles were brought up in your household?
I am an only child, and there wasn't too many spiritual or religious principles taught in my household. My mom grew up Catholic, but never really never really like talked about Catholicism, or never sent me to church, anything like that. My dad would take me on hikes, and show me these panoramas, and he would say, "This is my church, Kyle." And they also sent me to a Christian school, more for the education and the quality than the spirituality. But I did start to uh, lean into the Christian world. Um, Most of my high school years, I was very dedicated to Christianity. I found a community of people that I really enjoyed. I started playing in a music, or the youth band, and even became a youth music leader, and would plan all of the songs that we would sing on Wednesday nights in the youth group. And as I started to get through the end of high school, and many of my friends that I really enjoyed seeing in church started leaving or not being around as much, and I started getting jaded on the institution itself, uh, as many of us do right around that time. And I had a couple of people who were my core pillars of faith. I was able to draw faith from God, but I also saw God and Christianity through other people. One was, his name was Paul, and he was somebody that I mentored, and was like I was a few years older, and so whenever we would do like church camps or something, I would be in charge of him and a bunch of his friends in the cabins, and got to know him really well. His sister was one of the first girls I took out on a date or took to a dance, and I knew his family really, really well. Paul always had an amazing smile on his face, was always just this creative, inspirational, beautiful person. I was always delighted to see him. And sometime around my first year in college, I had found my way to get myself out of the responsibilities of being the music leader, and wasn't going to church as much. I would go every so often, and I would see him every so often, didn't think much of it. The way that I got out of uh, being a music leader is I went to a summer camp to teach in Maryland, to teach sailing to um, a lot of kids from like inner city Baltimore, and helped them just get some natural experiences. And there I met another pillar named Ben Entwistle. And he spent most of his teenage years in Africa. His father was a missionary doctor, and he would tell stories of every African creature that you could imagine, and how they attempted to kill him, and how he would escape by the skin of his teeth time and time and time and time again. He had a large scar on his sternum, because the one creature that he wasn't able to escape was either a bacteria or a virus, I'm not sure, but it was called rheumatic fever, and it necessitated a heart surgery on him at a very young age. I met him about 6 years later. He still had this big scar, but he was playing soccer, very athletic. He had recovered well, and was a beautiful person. And so, fast forward to me being 19 years old, and I'm preparing to travel to South America for the first time. I was really excited. I was going to be there for a month and start to learn Spanish. And a week before I departed, I got news that Paul had committed suicide. He was in his pottery room. He had made this pot, and then cut a big slash in it, and wrote this furious letter to the world, and hung himself in that room. And then I got on a plane and went to South America, and started drinking wine in the discotecas, and had the most perfect opportunity to dissociate from that entirely. And after a few weeks practicing my Spanish, getting better, I was in Chile at the time. I had a few other friends that were like, let's go to Peru. Let's go to Machu Picchu. I said, hell yeah, let's go. So we are all flying to Peru. We're getting ready for a 5-day trek on the Inca Trail. And the night before we depart, I get a phone call from another friend, informing me that Ben Entwistle had died of a stroke. There was an infection from his surgery that went up into his brain, and he died in transit to some advanced hospital things. And I was walking down the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in the quietude of that, still a decent distraction, but it was there that I decided that I didn't want to believe in God and I wanted to believe in myself and find ways to cultivate myself. And this would start the adventure of my 20s, which was absolutely incredible. I spent a lot of time in South America. I lived in Peru, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia. I would end up going down to the Amazon, and where many people might expect to hear that I did some kind of ayahuasca ceremony. No, I swam in an Amazonian lake and contracted Giardia,
No.
which is one of my least favorite pathogens that I've ever found in my life. Um, and it would go on to change my life in interesting ways. A few months after that, I was living in Brazil and I just had this intense anxiety, this certainty that there was something so wrong with me, and doing whatever I could, from drinking, I ate trashy food, and just tried to calm down this anxiety that I couldn't figure out. Um, and over the years, I started to also hear about how people were traveling the world and building businesses. And so I started figuring out how to do that for myself. And I found my avenue to that through writing.
Mhm.
And over the course of a few years, started developing my career in writing and speech writing and storytelling, which would lead me to workshops for speakers. And this really inspired me as an artist, which there's a whole artist thread that maybe we can explore later. But I remember somewhere around 2017 finding myself in a room filled with health and wellness experts. There were big bags under my eyes. Um, Trying to deal with my own health felt like dealing with the Hydra from the Hercules myth, where every time I like cut off one head, if I had like some intense wrist pain, I would deal with that, or tennis elbow, and I would deal with that. And then I would get pain in my jaw or pain in my knee, and no matter how many Tony Robbins books I read, I couldn't get rid of this anxiety.
Yeah.
And in
Well,
this room, oh, go ahead.
let's take a step back for just a moment.
Yeah.
Let's take a pause on that. How did those two pillar passings,
Yeah.
how did that have an effect on you?
It's affected me up until today. I, and it's one of the reasons why I do what I do. But because of that, I started telling myself a story and started wondering why I was alive and not them, because they were people that I admired and respected and thought that they should be around. And I didn't understand why me and my pettiness and my flaws was still here. And there was this story of not being good enough that I would carry with me. And I have no doubt that is also tied in with the sickness and the physicality that I experienced. And much of my 20s was grasping and reaching and trying to find my ways to be enough and establish myself, or just go on this adventure and try to fix this strange occurrence that had happened. And much of my 20s was like driving a really fast car with both feet on the gas and the brakes at the same time.
I think a lot of people in their 20s live that way, that have dealt with something pretty heavy, or multiple things pretty heavy like that. What advice would you give to them?
One of the most important things I learned in my journey in understanding my health and dealing with this constant anxiety is that even today I feel the same anxiety and the same experience, and it's almost impossible to wake up and think, wow, my hormones are a little bit unbalanced today. That must be why I feel bad. Or, oh, my gut dysbiosis is really messing with me this morning. It's never that. It's the other political party is messing things up. I hate them. Or these people down the street, or this problem here, or whatever it is. We put it in the world outside of us immediately. We tell a story. And to simply be able to start to open your mind to the reason why you feel bad is not the reason why you think you feel bad.
Yep. Yep. We have a saying in the massage world, where the pain is not where the issue is. So where it is where it isn't, is kind of what the saying is. I get it. So how did you use those to propel yourself forward?
When you say those,
The
these experiences,
passings, the experiences.
Not in any conscious or intelligent sort of way. I can't give myself that much credit. But it was a constant asking that question of why am I here, was a constant journey and a constant practice of not just asking the question, but answering it for myself and giving myself the answers and trusting in that. And which is why I think I really enjoyed the meaning and the ideas that would come from helping companies or individuals share their vision and who they are and what they were doing in ways that would attract people, either through content marketing or eventually speaking.
Yeah.
And I would this would lead me in all kinds of directions in creating a life where I was able to travel all over the world and live from my laptop. And these skill sets came very much in handy and were very important at a crucial time right around when the pandemic started. The pandemic started in March of 2020, and by November of 2020, I decided to take a 5-day vacation to Hawaii. And I thought I was going to be there just for that time, but I knew that I had spent a lot of time nomading, and I packed my bags exactly the same way that I would have packed my bags to move to Thailand for a year. And when I got there, where the rest of the world was shutting down and terrified and closed off, I saw people playing volleyball, people playing live music, sitting in restaurants. And I felt the same resonance from my younger 20 years of being able to travel, of doing what I wanted. And I believed that I could create what I wanted. I felt this intense magic in this place and started manifesting things. I pictured a perfect, like, mother-in-law apartment that I wanted to rent, and I opened up Airbnb and saw one for a discount. I extended my trip for a month and then 2 months, and it would eventually become 2.5 years. And during my time on the island, which I have a lot of theories about the big island of Hawaii, but I was able to reconnect with spirituality and heal and visit that wounding from my 20s. I don't know if I can really say I healed it, but I've revisited it and started to examine it and started to understand the impact that it was having on me. And I started to talk to God through the island in many ways, and started praying again in my own way and developing a trust in God and the universe again there.
So I'm hearing a common theme. Would you say that like in your early 20s or in your late teens, kind of like when you feel lost and you're out traveling the world and you're doing this thing, it also helps you to find yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I've always felt like a foreigner. There's probably something about my Enneagram or whatever the thing may be, but traveling, since I always felt like a foreigner, a strange person, actually being a foreigner was fairly comfortable for me.
Sure.
And through being in many places, learning other languages, there's a certain kind of contrast that happens. Like in Thailand, I discovered that people use forks and spoons differently than we do here in the United States. We in the United States will take our fork and we'll stab our food with it and eat it. And that's a perfectly fine way to use a fork. In Thailand, they'll take their spoon and they'll use the fork to kind of push food onto the spoon and they'll eat it that way. And that seems like an awfully small difference, but I had never known that to be. I had never seen an option there. And by being in another place and seeing how they did it, there was all of a sudden a dimension to how to use my forks and spoons that didn't exist before. Now, if you can multiply this idea by the rest of your life, it helped me started to see where the boundaries of my culture drew of who I am
Mhm.
and started to outline, okay, well, this is who I really am. This is who I choose to be. I'll choose to use my fork in this way, which
Yes,
again can be applied to everything else in your life when you can
absolutely.
see the contrast and the dimensions.
Versus the contracts that were given to you, you get to choose, right?
Yes.
So let's go back to your South American, where we left off with that, and getting Guardia.
Yeah.
How did
Um,
that and how did that impact the or propel you onto the next part of your journey?
oh, this is a great question. So, a few years after that, I had discovered I had a thyroid condition called Hashimoto's disease, which was probably a result of swimming in that lake, getting parasites and bacterias and things that would mess with my gut health and creating a lot of inflammation in my gut, which would unbalance my systems and my hormones and tax my thyroid. I also have no doubt that there is something metaphysical. It's no coincidence that I have a thyroid condition as somebody whose destiny and purpose is to speak my truth and to help those speak their truth
Because the thyroid is located in your throat,
in the throat. Yeah.
where you speak. Yes.
The throat chakra. And yeah, giving myself the love and respect of my own stories is always the challenge, which is just funny. And all these healers know all about this. We can always serve others and be the glorious healer for everyone else but ourselves. Anyway, the skill set was building, and I was upgrading from working in startups. I wrote some books and started inserting myself in different places. And I found somebody who was talking about how to use storytelling to grow your business from the stage and to give talks as the most powerful tool that you could use. And this reminded me of what it was like to be a singer songwriter, to be playing music. And I, in my kind of on the early 20s and early times, I put a lot of pressure on myself to write great songs. And I wanted to be a rock star immediately. And I ended up souring myself on music. And this speaking from the stage was like, wow, this is like triggering the same thing, scratching the same itch that I've wanted to for a long time. So I started working with them and serving and supporting them. They started growing very quickly. And since I was writing for them and understanding their process, they hired me to help them facilitate their workshops for speakers. And I found myself in a room one of these days filled with health and wellness experts. Oh, I've got before this room, a few weeks before, a few months before, I was experimenting with my first life coach.
Mhm.
And I can remember him asking me, what if Hashimoto's is your superpower? And I laughed at him, and I almost hung up
Yeah.
the Skype call because we were Skyping at that time.
Yes.
And this is the dumbest thing I had ever heard in my whole life. This was a curse. I was sure of it. This was the worst thing to happen to me. And now this asshole is trying to tell me something different. No, no, thank you, Jeremy. Moving on.
Yeah.
I'm in this room filled with health and wellness experts. And I sit down next to this one woman and she says, "Hey, my name's Dr. Grace. I help people overcome chronic autoimmune conditions through better gut health." And I say, "Oh, really? So your people must try and do this. They want this, but that happens." And she said, "Oh my God, you need to come work with me." She was absolutely brilliant at what she did, but had a very difficult time translating that into something that made sense for her people, for the ones that she wanted to serve. And so we arranged some work together where she would walk me through her Hashimoto's protocol, and where I would help her tell her story. I ghost wrote a book for her, which we also like built this whole funnel strategy in. We did some incredible work, and her business started to take off. And for me, within a few months, the anxiety, the pain, the fear that had once defined my life for so long started to melt away. And the story that I was broken forever and couldn't be fixed started to change. I had a grasp and a value on my health that I took for granted in my 20s and thought I would always be this way. And this autoimmune condition took me from being just another copywriter, just another blogger, just another whoever marketer, to finding a very specific niche of people that needed my help and that I was delighted to serve. And it's been one of the core groups of people that I've worked with in my career.
So your
As I
autoimmune disease did end up being
a superpower.
a
Who
superpower.
would have thought? Thank you, Jeremy.
You just needed the right person and you needed to be ready at the right time.
Yeah. This when I started to feel better, I also had access to my mindset again for the first time. You can't fix your mindset if your body is messed up. I mean, maybe you can. There are some ways, but if the way to up in here is definitely by treating your gut well, by sleeping well, by it, and you're just defeating yourself if you're not trying these things while giving yourself the affirmations that you want to hear. And I started to,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Because the pain can override your mental capacities, the uncomfortableness, the affects the blood flow and the oxygen levels to your brain, all the things. So they both have to be working together.
it really creates this interesting question of where you begin and where you end. Because for a long time, there's like the creatures that live inside you. You're not just a single you, but there are all kinds of bacteria, both good guys and bad guys, and and in my case, and in most of our cases, though, Americans don't like to admit this, that we have parasites living within us. And these creatures know how to make you feel bad. And they make you feel bad because that makes you eat sugar. And that's how they get fed. Amazing. Those
Yeah.
sneaky little bastards.
Yes. So you just have to figure out what the right path is for you, whether you deal with the physicality first, or you
Yeah,
deal with the mentality first, or maybe both at the same, a little bit of both at the same time.
absolutely.
Yes. So how, I love that not only have you used the loss of your friends to help propel your spirituality, But now you're also using this autoimmune disease, and there's millions of people out there with autoimmune diseases to also help propel your spirituality. What would you like to leave our audience that's listening? If there's anybody that's listening that has an autoimmune disease, what do you recommend for, like, what advice would you give them, or what would you like them to take away from this part of your story?
For most of my 20s, when I was suffering from these things, I thought that it was a permanent thing that I would have to deal with for the rest of my life. And in my experience in working now with hundreds of health and wellness experts like Dr. Grace, there is always hope and always room for improvement in your body. And it is possible. And I also think that it's so important to declare that I believe that most of the distress we feel as a country has its roots in something like this. When my hormones were messed up, I couldn't think that clearly, and I feel that most of us are seeing distress in an outside world that's coming from our own guts. And if we could learn to direct that inward and love ourselves, I think most of the problems and division that we're facing as a country would not be nearly the same issue.
Yes, 100% agree. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So let's get back onto your Hawaiian journey and getting back into communication with who you call God.
Yeah.
And what started that journey off, and how did that go?
Great question. So in 2019, the same doctor, Dr. Grace, invited me to this event called Paleo FX, this health and wellness conference in Austin, Texas. And I met a lot of awesome people there. One person I met, his name was Mark England. And he taught this really powerful inner story framework. And I really enjoyed what he was doing. I had him on my podcast, and he was coming to Utah for a ceremony, and I remember just like getting lunch with him and talking with him. And at this time, I had an agency I had a bunch of stay-at-home moms working with me. I was helping people with their speeches and webinars, and then I had all these stay-at-home moms writing sales emails and sales pages and building all of the things. And I was speaking a lot. I was traveling a bunch, and my entire philosophy was make more sales and make more money to throw money at all of the problems of my business, because I was like, my team was kind of disorganized and redlining and crazy, and my clients and team were fighting all the time. Everybody loved me, because who wouldn't? But it was like chaos everywhere else. I remember calling Mark and I said, "Hey, I need a new coach. I need a new life coach to help me with me." And he said, "You become the coach." Fine. And so I started learning these techniques, these storytelling techniques, right at the beginning of 2020. And I started, what I was amazed by is I already knew all of this stuff. Everything I was learning about the stories that I used to influence myself was everything that I already knew about the stories that I would tell to create influence from the stage. It was fascinating and very exciting. And then the world shut down, and I let go of all of my team in the midst of that chaos. And somewhere along the line, I just decided to become the world-class presentation coach that I am, and just own that element of what I did and let other people take care of the other parts. And shortly thereafter is when I decided to go to Hawaii and had this adventure. And I started seeing the interplay of how I could tell a story that would change me, or how I could tell a story that would be influential. I have a good example of how all of these practices came together in a short story, if you're willing to hear about somebody I worked with.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit.
In a little bit, great.
Yeah.
Um, so there were just many times, and that I think there's always been this lingering thing, and I feel it a lot, of just I'm a high achieving person, and I expect my life to be, a certain way, or have a certain amount, and I have invested a lot in myself and always want to be further along. And my time on the island helped me distance myself from a world that was going mad in my eyes,
Mhm.
and start to give myself more time and space, and slow down, and just be by the water and be by the beaches. And when I could really tap into that faith, the results would come. And when I was out of that faith, I would be yeah, I would be challenged in many ways. And there was this ever that question that Paul left me with, or I don't know if I can really blame him, but the question that I left myself with is, why should I be here? Am I enough? Is this worth it? What is this adding up to? Shouldn't I be further along by now? I'm in my 30s now. Shouldn't I have a house, a nice house, and maybe a wife, something like that? Now I'm just still kind of going month to month in these things, or things don't seem to be adding up. And it would just be this back and forth of, I'm serving a purpose, and I am an incredibly different person than most people, and I don't know where this path is leading me or taking me, and I can trust it.
Yes. So earlier you said that's when you started talking to God and developing a relationship.
Yeah, I would watch the waves, and I would pray. I would go to the volcano many times. I went to the volcano so many times. I know exactly where and how to jump over the fences that they say you're not supposed to jump over. And I would go right up to this. I have this picture of this road with the two yellow lines that just cracked off. And then you can see down into a lava fiery pit.
Oh,
And
wow.
I feel a primal fear when I can look down into this caldera and feel the heat of lava on my
Sure.
face from hundreds of yards away.
Yes.
And so I would go to that volcano, and I would pray. And I often, when I was distressed, and I would cry and pour out some, apparently, Pele, according to mythology, likes gin and tobacco. So I would bring gin and tobacco and pour it out and just cry a bunch. And yeah, slowly starting to talk to God again, and hearing God speak to me through other people and through other conversations. I've heard God speak to me through Christians, through many other religions as well, and just seeing the messages and being willing to listen and open my mind up to it.
So what does God sound like to you?
It's not really a sound.
Okay.
Um, maybe there's a feeling. There's a certain sense of alignment. There's a certain sense of trust and it's this belief in myself and in the universe, which are the same in a lot of ways, and being able to uh, accept it for what it is, and move forward. I don't know if that's
So
a very good answer.
how do you know? It's a great answer. How do you know that God is speaking to you through somebody else?
Sometimes they tell me, they say,
Okay.
I feel like God is talking to me, to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the messages often come when I'm feeling really bad. I'm in a dark place, and then somebody will say something. And yeah, there is a certain feeling of there's this alignment or a closeness or a
Okay.
feeling of faith, that I can like it resonates within me, kind of in the heart, or the I
And
have a
it's
lot of,
palpable.
yeah, within me, or
I
the
love that.
solar plexus is usually a great barometer for
Yes.
my spirituality.
Yes. So in some cultures, right, you have your solar plexus, and in other cultures, it's called your chi. It's all the same energy, or it's all the same concept and energy that's in our core,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So depending on what culture that you're in, there's different words for the same thing.
Hmm.
So how did that move you forward? So you went from being in having some sort of relationship with God when you were working for the Christian church, and then you stepped away from that, and now you're redeveloping that. How does that look different? And how do you use your spirituality today in business and in your personal life?
Hmm. My spirituality is directing the love towards myself and my gifts, and acting in faith in sharing those, and acting in generosity and openness to sharing and allowing those. Like what I said about the challenges that we're facing in our country, I
Mhm.
believe that we are beset with the largest challenges that we've faced as a human race right now. And I also believe that we have the human capacity to meet these challenges and to usher in a beautiful time of abundance. And in order to do that, there are Einsteins, there are Malalas, there are Martin Luther Kings, there are brilliant people that are asleep right now. And they need to be reached by experts like you, Wendy, like me, like everybody listening in here. They need to be activated. And I see it as my role to help find and express my truth and allow others to express their truth, which will activate these people and bring us into the time that I believe is possible and forthcoming.
Awesome. That's so beautiful. Because there's a lot of truth, people are so, especially right now in our current global situation, people are very cautious with their words because they're afraid to offend, because so many people are being offensive or responding with an offensive reaction. And I don't, so how do I want to phrase this? People are being very careful with their words to not be offensive or offend someone, but also in fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of power. We're finding out as a global economy that there's a lot of power in words, whether positive
Mm-hmm.
or negative or indifferent. There's still a lot of power in words. How do you use your words for your authenticity? And how do you encourage or enables the right word, others to do the same?
Mm. I think I can answer this all through within um, a story of somebody that I've worked with. We should be careful with our words in a different way, and instead of worrying about offending people, we should understand the impact that it's having on ourselves. And this is really this has just started to become like really understood by me. I've known that these two worlds are the same, but I haven't been able to articulate it. But
Mhm.
most of the time, the experts and the brilliant people that I work with, entrepreneurs and leaders, we've all been traumatized and we're all addicted to achievement. And that shows up in the stories we tell and how we talk about ourselves. And we should try to share all the things that we've done. We read off our resume and our achievements and things to prove to the world that we're good enough. And when we try to tell a story about ourselves, it feels uncertain and weird because that's who we are. And because we are addicted to achievement, and that's been an awfully fine thing to get us to where we are, but now it's no longer serving us, it's holding us back. And we avoid sharing our stories, which are the things that people need to hear and who we are. And we feel usually the thing that we feel worst about ourselves, the most ashamed, the darkest part, is what will actually be what the audience needs. And this is, I worked with a health coach named Debbie, and she came onto a call to create a story with me. And she opens up immediately, Kyle, I'm stressed out. You see, I've been working with women with hormone problems and I've been fixing them. I say, Debbie, that doesn't sound like a problem. She's like, but I want to work with children and who have ADHD and I want to work with their parents. But I'm having trouble with focus. And just recently, I discovered that I have ADHD and I'm in my late 50s. And now I've been looking back at decades of dopamine driven decisions that have led my life every which way. And I just keep thinking to myself, if my parents had only known, they could have done something. This is not the attitude that is conducive to good storytelling. Or maybe it is. I ask her, do you want to play a game? She says, yes. I say, write down what you just said. If my parents had only known, they could have done something. I have her read it out loud, take a big breath, read it out loud, take a big breath, read it out loud, take a big breath. How does that feel? It feels bad. Perfect. We're on the right track. Let's change one word. If I had only known, I could have done something. Read, breathe, read, breathe. How does that feel? A little bit better, still not good. I know now I can do something. How does that feel? Getting closer. There's something here. And I ask her, what's one of the biggest reasons that somebody wouldn't want to work with you? And she says, well, parents don't want to open up this can of worms with an ADHD diagnosis, so they'd rather just ignore it. I say, Debbie, what does that lead to? It leads to decades of dopamine driven decisions that have led your life every which way. And she gets it all of a sudden. I know now, and that's why my message is so important. Now she's ready to tell a story. And I ask her to tell a story about somebody in her family that experienced ADHD symptoms. Instantly, she knows it. She starts talking about her grandson running around, bouncing off of the walls, and the boy's father yelling at him. And they both end up frustrated, exasperated, and exhausted. And she looks at her grandson, and she knows exactly what's going on. And she starts to wonder if he's ever going to get what he really needs, because she starts to look back on her own life and decades of dopamine driven decisions that have led her life every which way. And she thinks to herself, if my parents had only known, they could have done something. And that disempowered darkness that she opened up the call with was the line that sniper targeted the biggest objection that people had to working with her. And this is now, like, in this story, in this moment, this is the interplay that makes how we share our story and how we share ourselves with the world one of the most powerful healing and transformative processes out there. And we created the enrollment in herself that she wanted her listeners to experience.
So her ADHD was your Hashimoto's.
Well observed. Yeah.
I love it. Right. So you used your experiences with using Hashimoto's as your warrior to help her guide and do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't connected those two moments in quite this way before, but that's absolutely true.
And that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And this is the importance of using life experiences as a benefit to others instead of allowing them to be a crutch, instead of allowing them to weigh you down, just as you have done on so many occurrences with your spiritual journey, with your health journey, um, all of the things even though you've been in the mud with some of these things, right? The way that you picked yourself back out, or the way that you've allowed your life experiences to help pick you out of the mud, and then use that for good for other people, is just, that to me is very inspirational. And that
Thank
to
you.
me is the whole point, is a big point of your story.
Thank you.
Would
It's
you agree with that?
I do agree. And it's beautiful to be witnessed in this way, because just like everybody that I work with, I still struggle with this, and I still have a hard time believing that it's always adding up to something that's exciting and worthwhile. And these are the acts of faith when you are in the uncertainty and in the darkness. And if we are an entrepreneur or a leader or a creator, then it is our role and responsibility to constantly be venturing forth into the darkness and creating a light for others to lead. And it's not when I feel good or I feel most aligned that the magic really happens, but it's in the times where I want to give up so badly that the faith is exercised.
And it's when faith is the most important. One of my favorite quotes is, and I'm not going to say this verbatim because I have an issue with quoting things, but um, peace is not meant to be amongst calm, quiet, and stable. Real peace is found during the chaos, the trouble, and the hard work. Same with faith, right? It's easy to have faith or to have some sort of spiritual beliefs when everything's going well. But how do you use that when you're in the mud, when you're getting ready to give up, or when you're feeling like things are insurmountable?
Mm-hmm.
So, with the last few minutes that we have, what advice, or what is the last thing that you want to leave our audience with on that note? Is how do you find that deep faith, that deep belief system when you are in that space?
You find it in the people that you want to serve. If you are feeling the darkness, then you are focused on yourself and your own limitations. And there are people out there like me, like I was, like Paul, like everybody that I've talked about before, that are suffering, that are in pain, that are confused, that are hurting. And because you are lost in your own stories and pettiness right now, you're not serving them. And when we can start to focus on those that need us, and know that it is our divine responsibility to share who we are and what we do, and to take a stand for making the world the better place that we want it to be. We're not selling, we're not trying to make a buck or anything. We are making this world better, and it is our responsibility to do so. When you can see it that way, you will find the energy to move forward.
That was beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sharing. And in light of part of this conversation and one of my own family members taking their life this week, I just want to relay to the audience, if you are feeling depressed, if you are feeling um, challenged to stay on this planet, if you are feeling high levels of anxiety or overwhelm, please seek help. Whether it's a family member, a friend, a therapist, a coach of some kind, a church, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's a number one, combined, more than one of those resources, whatever that looks like for you. Please reach out, get some help. There's free resources all over the place. And I just want to thank Kyle for being on our episode today and for being vulnerable and courageous, for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful story. And I hope you guys comment. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Share your comments, share your feedback, subscribe to our show, and we'll see you in a few weeks for the next one.